You might be asking yourself, what is geocaching? It is a high-tech treasure hunt done outdoors where people use GPS technology to search for hidden containers called geocaches. You've already been using GPS technology in your cars when you ask for directions, possibly without even knowing it. We geocachers like to think of ourselves as modern day Indiana Jones out beating our way through the jungle looking for lost artifacts. What we're actually doing is poking around in trees and looking under rocks. And our treasures are little plastic boxes with a logbook in them. A little bit of history about GPS. It stands for Global Positioning System. It was initially just used for military when the US began launching satellites in the 1970s. Civilians started using the technology in the 80s, mainly for small aviation and boating. And then in the 1990s, the government decided to degrade the satellite signal. This had to do with wartime and not making it too easy for people to pinpoint targets. And this was called selective availability. Then on May 2nd, 2000, selective availability was discontinued, and overnight GPS accuracy went from plus or minus 150 feet to plus or minus 10 feet. The very next day, a curious computer programmer named Dave Ulmer decided to hide a big black plastic bucket in the woods outside Portland, Oregon. And then he posted the coordinates on a Usenet news group and invited people to go find it and test GPS accuracy. Within 3 days, 2 different people had found the stash and documented their findings online. The newsgroup discussion continued and others started hiding things in other places in the world. One of these caches survives to this day. It's the oldest surviving geocache in the world, located in Mingo, Kansas. And it is still visited. Well, we found it 3 years ago. That's a picture of the container. It's just a plastic box. It's hidden by a fence post under a rock. It's hardly hidden at all. And to this day, 300 to 400 people a year visit and find this cache. Then in September 2000, almost exactly 20 years ago, a web developer in San Francisco named Jeremy Irish launched a site called Geocaching.com. By this point, people had coined the term geocache for these things they were hiding. Initially, they weren't sure what to call them. Geostashes was one proposal. Thanks to the Wayback Machine, I found an early depiction of what the website looked like back in 2001. The hobby caught on like wildfire, and by 6 months, there was at least one geocache in all 50 states and many more all over the world. Today, the homepage is much more sophisticated and looks like this. And today, there are over 3 million geocaches hidden worldwide. They're on all 7 continents. That's a picture of one we found when we were in Antarctica a few years ago. It's at the Penguin Post Office, and you just go in and sheepishly ask, is there a geocache in here somewhere? And then they happily pull it out from under the counter. A little closer to home, here in New York State, we have over 30,000 geocaches. There are approximately 1,500 in Westchester, and we have 33 of them in the Saw Mill River Audubon sanctuaries. Worldwide, there are approximately 7 million people active geocaching. And you could be one of them if you aren't already. It's very easy to get started. The only thing you need is to have an account at geocaching.com. It's free, it's easy to sign up. You might even want to sign up while you're listening to this Zoom. You can download the app for your phone. You don't need to buy a specific GPS receiver. Your phone can do everything you need. Now, if you do sign up and get an account, I recommend you enter your address in the search area and look and see what geocaches are near where you live. You might be surprised. For an example, I entered the address of Prime Sanctuary in Chappaqua, and the results show us that there are 1,054 geocaches within a 10-mile radius. And if I map these geocaches, here's a screenshot of geocaches in Westchester. Here, if you can see my cursor, is Prime Sanctuary with a few caches. There's a series of green dots running down the middle of the screen. These are geocaches located along the North County Trailway. There's another line of green circles along the west side where the old Croton Aqueduct Trail is. There's another big group in T-Town. It's a really great way to see what areas of the county might be interesting to visit. Well, why don't we just give you an example of how to go find a cache. I've picked one of the ones that is in Prime Sanctuary called Between a Rock and a Hard Place. On the left is what the cache description would look like in the app on your phone, and I have the information from a computer screenshot on the right. All the information on the computer is also available if I just scroll down in the app further. At the bottom right, I list parking coordinates for where you would start your adventure, and that's at the wood mill entrance to Prime Sanctuary. And now I have a short video of me finding the cache. It's only 1 minute long. Here I am at the start, opening the app. I pick the cache I wish to go to, and there's several different choices of screen. I can look at the map, I can look at the compass. It points me in the general direction, and then I have an enjoyable walk in the woods. Occasionally double check, am I going the right way? Am I getting closer? No need to leave the trail, just enjoy yourself. And once you get within 20 or 30 feet, it's time to put the GPS device away and just use common sense. And think, now where would a big box be hidden in this area? Oh, maybe it's over there under the rock. And this is what a typical geocache looks like. This one's a big ammo box. Ammo boxes are great containers because they're waterproof. You can leave them out in the woods for 20 years and they usually don't leak. You get everything wet inside. Here's a recap of a few of those screenshots that were on my phone while I was looking for the geocache. To the left, I start with just a satellite view. The blue dot is where I was standing next to my car, and all of the yellow circles indicate geocaches near where I am. I picked one that was 0.3 miles away to walk to. And then I periodically would switch between the map view and the compass view as I was navigating to there. The choice is up to you of whether you want to just find the map or have a compass. I should note that while the compass is accurately showing me that the cache is to the east and it's 375 feet away, it may not be pointing you in the right direction unless you've calibrated your phone correctly. So again, use common sense. If the number's going up and not down, you're walking the wrong direction, turn around. One thing that almost every cache has inside it is a logbook, and people sign their names. Sometimes they write little stories about their find. Some people have personalized stamps with their name on them. There's one geocacher a couple counties to the north of us that can draw, and he'll draw the scene that he sees from the cache site in the logbook. So I like to look through logbooks and see if anybody's written or drawn anything interesting in the past. I unfortunately can't draw, so all I do is sign my name. And we leave some fish bead tokens. Are named the salmons after all. Speaking of tokens, larger size caches will have some tchotchkes, and people sometimes trade things. You don't have to trade things. So if you do take something, it's good to put something back in return. Here's a couple of examples of what kinds of things you might find. BYOP, bring your own pen, is part of the geocaching lingo. So now if you have entered your home address and found there's 1,000 caches near you, what should you consider to choose one to go and find? There's one of the things you should keep in mind are what type of cache. The bulk of geocaches are traditional caches. That's what I showed you in our example. But there's a special type called mystery or puzzle. That one will not be located at the coordinates given on the web page. A puzzle cache will have some type of puzzle you have to solve. Here's an example of a simple one where you have to figure out now, how do I find the rest of this longitude and latitude? Oh, maybe I have to count the bubbles above the fishes.
I did one of those for a camp.
That's good. A couple of other interesting types of geocaches are event caches and a special event called CITO, or cache in, trash out. These are caches that take place at a specific place at a specific time, and are a great are a great way to get involved with the community and find other people. There are also some special virtual caches which won't have a container hidden there, but again, the website will have instructions of what you should expect. So just read the description. But there's also a multi-stage cache which will have more than one thing you have to find along the way. Another thing you want to consider when you go out to look for caches, how big is this thing I'm looking for? It's obvious. If you're looking for a big ammo box in the woods, there aren't going to be that many places. But if you're looking for a small size cache, like this magnetic Heideke I'm holding in my hand, then it could be different places. This one happened to be magnetically attached underneath the pillar that I'm standing next to. There's an extremely small size geocache called a nano. These can be hard to find sometimes. And unless you really want a challenge, I don't recommend you make a nano your first geocache find. There's also cache size other. Other can be anything. Usually it means that the hider just wants you to be surprised. Like with this fake birdhouse, we were looking around on the ground everywhere. I'm not sure how long we were there until one of us finally looked up. The box had a label on the bottom saying geocache, so we knew we weren't taking down a real birdhouse. In fact, that hole is just painted on there. There's no hole in it. Here are a couple of others. Again, they were meant to be a surprise. This hollowed out baseball was indeed hidden next to a baseball field, but something about it just said, pick this up and look at it. So again, all of the information you need before you go find a cache is right there in the app or on the web page, what size it is. And then there's also difficulty and terrain. These numbers go from 1 to 5, with 1 indicating easy and 5 being hard. Now, terrain is fairly self-explanatory. A terrain 1 is meant to be a simple walk, probably wheelchair accessible. And as you go up in numbers, they get harder. By 4, you might have a lengthy hike or a bit of a climb. And if you find a terrain equals 5 cache, it means special equipment is needed. There are several caches in the Croton River that require you to get to them by kayak. And often that's a way to get together with other geocachers and say, hey, anybody want to go find these caches with me? Difficulty is a little more subjective. Again, 1 is meant to be easy and 5 is meant to be hard. Here's just an example. I'll let you think about what you would call this. This is a brown camouflaged container attached to a telephone pole. A casual passerby would probably not even see it. But to a geocacher, you walk up, there's no place else around where anything can be hidden. It's at eye level. It's pretty easy, actually. And once you start finding a few geocaches, you would agree. Some other things I like to consider when I'm in a new area looking for geocaches is what other people have to say about them in the logs. First off, a string of yellow smiley faces means people have found it. A string of blue frowny faces means people have looked but can't find it. That often means the thing is missing. But if you see a bunch of smiley faces and people have found it and they have nice things to say, well, maybe you'll enjoy the place. The geocaches can also have favorite points attached to them. Once you find a thing, you're allowed to give it a favorite point if you liked it. Things with more favorite points are often nicer than things with none, though it might just mean it's visited more often. For example, there's a geocache on top of the Empire State Building that has over 1,000 favorite points. It is quite nice up there. This happens to be a virtual cache. They didn't actually hide anything up there. There is still something you have to find, and you have to report back to the cache owner what that was. Also, one other thing, sometimes caches have attributes. They might be things like, are dogs allowed? Are bicycles allowed? Is it snow friendly? Is it available certain hours? It's just a good thing to double check. Now, you are outside looking, poking around under rocks and bushes. Just be safe. There could be snakes lurking in there. In the 18 years we've been geocaching, we haven't found that many snakes. Poison ivy, on the other hand, I've found plenty of. Evidently, a lot of people may not know what poison ivy looks like, or they hide a geocache in winter and are surprised when poison ivy covers it in the summer. So leaves are free, let it be, or find a stick to dig the cache out if you really must get to it. And don't just stare at your phone, look around, enjoy your surroundings. And also, just because the GPS says it's off the cliff doesn't mean it is. Somebody hid it. They didn't want to walk through that briar patch or wade through the water either, probably. So what are some things I like about geocaching? Well, over the years, it's taken me to many interesting things that I wouldn't have noticed otherwise. It's introduced me to new parks. It's introduced me to sanctuaries. There's Serratic in North Salem. It's just off the road. You could see it driving by if you weren't paying attention to driving, but I had never noticed it even though I'd driven by it many, many times. But because there was a geocache there, one day I stopped, walked around, took in the area. It was quite nice. As I mentioned, we have 33 geocaches in Saw Mill sanctuaries. When I first moved to New York, I learned about Saw Mill because I visited a geocache that was located in Pine Cliff. And then I noticed there were caches in other sanctuaries and other nice places. And one day out in the woods, I met Anne Swain. So geocaching is a great way to find nice places to visit and meet nice people. This is a list of some of the Saw Mill caches. I realize it's too small to read. Here's another amusing thing. I found a geocache called At the Fork in the Road. And sure enough, there was a big fork at the fork in the road. Some geocache hiders like to tell you about local history and find spots that amuse them, and sometimes I find them interesting, like these stones that were placed in Van Cortlandt Park when the New York Railroad was getting ready to build the Grand Central Terminal. They placed 13 different types of stone out in the woods to see how they would weather, and they're still there today. Sometimes you just find wacky things when you're geocaching. At this very expensive neighborhood in California, one of the most expensive neighborhoods in the country, there's this abandoned couch. And some geocache hider thought, well, this is weird, I'll just stick a geocache under it. We thought it was kind of weird, though there is a $3 million view and you can just comfortably sit on the couch. Some geocaches are very creative. Some people hide little tiny containers like this critter on the right. I sometimes make things look like fish. Here was one I quite liked. This plastic creature that's sitting on the rock next to John was hidden. It's camouflaged to look like a boulder, and if it's placed on the ground with the face against the boulder, it just looks like another rock. And you could walk by without seeing it, but when you pull it out, suddenly the face greets you, and there's a little plastic Tupperware stuck inside that you pull out to find the logbook. Here's just a few more examples of some of the creative caches I've either seen or I made the fish one that's in the middle. I also quite like this guy that I saw peeking out at me as I walked by the end of a dead stump. Some caches are cute by context. For example, someone hid a bunch of film canisters, they're not film canisters, sorry, pill bottles with some camo tape, but they put each one of them inside a little tiny plastic shoe and called it the Cinderella series. And you just went from one to the other in this park in Connecticut, finding Cinderella slippers. Then there was this caching experience at the edge of a cemetery as the sun was going down, and I found this severed hand. It's okay. It was indeed the geocache. Some people get carried away, like the one on the right, this fake bolt. The bolt is hollowed out. The nut is its lid, and this teeny tiny strip of paper, it's rolled up inside. You need tweezers to get it out. But that is the log, and I signed it with our name. Geocaching, while it's an activity that you can do by yourself or with your family and choose to do it at your own pace whenever you feel like it, it also can have a lot of community involvement. For example, I organized a geocaching event as part of I Love My Park Day on the Croton Aqueduct. At the time, I didn't realize I was taking my picture next to the Saw Mill River Audubon banner because I was just standing next to the geocaching banner on the other side. There are also a lot of cash in, trash out events. This has been part of geocaching since the very beginning. There's an annual event at Saxon Woods that has hauled out probably a ton or more of trash over the years. Sometimes we get together with other geocachers for special geocaches, like the Lost Cities, which were a series of caches in a swamp in New Jersey. You might note we're all wearing hip waders. They were needed. It was still a lot of fun that day. There are chance encounters in the woods. Every now and then someone will come up to me and say, hey, are you Team Moo Moo? And then I'm reminded, oh yes, I have a personalized license plate. So did MST Zilla, who's a Mystery Science Theater fan, but also a geocacher. So geocaching, I find, is just fun for the whole family. And that is all I have to say. Here's the map again. And I'll be happy to take questions if there are any.